Hi everyone, this is Neha and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this episode of Ask Open Source, I'll be talking about some very important open source etiquette or open source practices that you need to keep in your mind while contributing to open source. Now, before I get into this video, I really want to emphasize on the fact that these are just some general open source practices or etiquettes. Like these are not like really uh, like principles or something that needs to be applied at every situation. Now, if you have committed some of the mistakes that I'll be talking about during this video, then you do not need to worry. Since we need to start from some point. I personally have made a lot of these mistakes when I started my open source journey. So hopefully through this video, you probably won't make the same mistakes that I made. And that's all. Let's get started. The first point I'm going to be talking about is only work on issues that haven't been claimed. So what I mean by this is that I see a lot of issues in which the someone has already commented that I want to work on this issue, and that issue has already been assigned to that particular person. But some other contributor just comes in and starts working on the issue, and they might open a pull request earlier than this other person, and they expect that the pull request will get merged. But that is not really how it works. It's more of a first come first serve basis, and since the first person has already claimed the issue, they'll get the highest priority when it comes to merging of that pull request. Now, there might be situations where your pull request gets merged, and that can be if, for example, the issue is very old and if someone claimed that issue and they did not actually work on it. So in that case, you can just tag that person who claimed the issue or tag the person who opened that issue and ask if if issue is still open to work on, and accordingly you can just start working on that issue. But as a general rule of thumb, do not start working on an issue that is not claimed by you, and that is not like really an old issue, or if there are any active pull requests, then definitely do not claim and start working on that issue right away. So that would be my suggestion. Now, point number two is going to be follow community guidelines. So what I mean by this is that usually what happens is that we as coders, we as open source contributors, we fail to realize that there are a lot of new contributors coming in, and they may not have the knowledge that we have. And because of this, what happens is that during I have seen a lot of times that people review other people's pull requests, and they tend to leave some comments that might not be that helpful or nice for the contributor who opened the pull request. And this is something that is not generally liked in the open source community, because we realize that everyone here is new, everyone is beginning at some point, and we all need to come together, help and uplift each other. So these kind of comments are not really tolerated. So it's really, if you are reviewing a pull request and if you do find there are some mistakes with the person's pull request, then be very helpful and respectful and help them, guide them towards the right path rather than just leaving some comments that aren't that helpful to them. Similarly, like building upon this point, there are lots of community guidelines in the open source communities to protect any sort of behavior that counts as verbal abuse, verbal harassment, and not just these rude or disrespectful comments. Like this is even a higher degree of this, and if you are found doing any of such activities, then the community members, the community maintainers will definitely block you from the organization if they see these activities. Remember, they are very vigilant of all the sort of comments and activities that you put on the open source organization's GitHub or on the social channels. Moving on to the next point, I'm going to call it message publicly. So what I mean by this is that generally what happens is that we start contributing an organization and we tend to have certain queries, and we end up messaging directly or messaging personally to maintainers or community leads or some person of importance in the community. And this is not something that is generally encouraged. Instead, what they might encourage you to do is to message whatever query you have in the public channels of that organization. And the reason behind it is there are a couple of reasons behind it. Now, the first reason is that you may have a query that is actually being very repeated right? So a lot of other people might have the same query, and because you are directly messaging them, then you might not get the answer really fast because the maintainer is actually very busy with everything going on. And the other thing is that if your query gets answered in the public channel, then other people can also see the query being answered, and they can actually use that to actually navigate or to set up or do anything that they want to. And the second reason is that if your query gets answered in the public channel, then it can also help other contributors who have a similar query. Now, moving on to the next reason why I think this is something I generally look down upon is because the open source community, there are a lot of programs such as Google Summer of Code or Outreachy, and in such programs, we do not encourage any sort of favoritism towards a particular participant. And that's the reason why it is generally encouraged to message publicly. Now, I have personally made mistakes when I did not know about this point and messaged people directly asking them certain questions or queries about the project. But there's no like a problem if you have also done something similar. They'll just politely or very kindly reply back to you and like tell you that it'll be better if you just leave the same message on the public channel. So not worry if you have made this mistake. Now the next one I'm going to talk about is called be patient and follow up. So what I mean by this is that what happens is like with my mentoring experience, I've seen that sometimes contributors tend to get a bit impatient if the contributions are not reviewed instantly. And you have to understand that this is not possible on the part of the maintainers or the community members to review your pull request very quickly because they have a lot of other activities going on simultaneously. And you have to realize this and have to give them some time to review the pull request rather than just messaging or like notifying them through GitHub or on other on the social channels of the channel for a review. They will review it as soon as they can. So this is something that you have to understand. And the second part of this is follow up, which means that if the maintainer is requesting some changes, then do try to follow up on the pull request. This is not much of an open source etiquette, but just something that can really help you progress in your open source journey by finally get your pull request merged and then move on to solving even more of the issues that you want to know more about. So moving on to the next point. Now this is called documentation is the key. So this is not much of an open source etiquette or a practice, but this is like something that you definitely need to keep in mind before you start contributing to an organization. Is that some or most of the questions that you have in mind actually get answered through documentation if you go through it very rigorously. So it can be the README, it can be some read the docs that the organization has, it can be some small manuals that or links that they have attached on their GitHub to read through, such as like the contributing guidelines. So it will cover all the things that you have to do when you're opening a pull request that you might have queries about. For example, passing the like testing process that they have on the pull requests. So these things can really cut down on the time that it takes you to open the pull request if you go through that rigorously, and it also prevents the maintainers from replying to the same questions over and over again. Now that being said, it's not a problem for the open source organization to help people. It's just an open source practice that can actually help both of the parties involved if one follows the documentation very rigorously. Now, another open source etiquette or point that you have to keep in mind is to name the commit or commit message in a proper way. So, proper commit message. So, if you did follow the contributing guidelines, as I mentioned in the previous point about documentation, then sometimes the organization specifies what is the format of that commit message. For example, some organizations have something like bug fix and a colon and what is the exact thing, or feature, add feature or something, and then something like that. Or they might ask you to write a descriptive like summary of what are the changes that you made and how it changes in the code base. So these are things that you can look up into the contributed guidelines, try to make it into something that can actually make sense. For example, if you just write something like updates xyz.html file, then this won't really make sense, right? For someone who looks back in the comments as to what this is trying to do. Instead of that, if you just write something like add translations to xyz.html file, then this makes a lot more sense, and someone can just look back and then revert this commit in case any problem arises, or we can just look through the changes to see what was being done through this pull request, and they can just understand it right from the glance of the commit message that what this pull request is trying to do. Alright, now moving on to the last and the final point of the day, which I think is very important, is one issue equals one pull request. And what I mean by this is that lot many times contributors try to solve multiple issues to a single pull request, and it becomes very difficult to actually merge those changes because we have to be very cautious about all the different changes that are going on. We do not have a proper log of the different changes that have been executed through this pull request, so it won't be possible for us to retract or remove the changes of a very specific issue from that pull request, because we have to undo the entire commit. So these are some things that you have to keep in mind when you're opening a pull request. The other end of this is that sometimes if there are 2 or 3 files that has to be changed in a issue, so I've seen people open multiple pull requests for that single issue. Now this is also not encouraged. So just try to follow one issue is equals to one pull request. That is very easy for the maintainers to go ahead and look at the issue, look at the changes, and merge your pull request finally. That's all for this video. If you like this video, then please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I'm just starting out, and your support really goes a long way. I'll be posting more such content on open source and coding and programming, and if there's something else that you would like me to cover, then please leave a message down below and I'll try my best to get it done. That's all for the video. Bye guys.